something.
Yeah, we're going to review some things that are on the sheet. And we started learning about them yesterday, so we'll talk a little bit more about them today. Washing your hands with soap. What's the issue with washing your hands with soap? So if it is hard soap, bar soap, so the issue is there's two issues. First of all, there's a question of noilad or moilid, that you are creating liquid. The soap turns into liquid. It liquefies when you rub it. So that's similar to liquefying ice.
I thought the soap is liquid before and then they make it hard, no? I'm not sure.
I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know how they make it. So what?
If it was liquid before.
It doesn't make a difference. Ice is also liquid before. Ice is liquid before.
Yes, that's why we're allowed to use
That's why you're not allowed to melt ice and make it into water.
Oh, but you're allowed to put it in a cup and drink.
Put it in a cup, yes, but melt it with your hands. You're not allowed to.
Oh, okay.
So here, you're actually melting it with your hands. You're rubbing it with your hands. Actively melting it. Even the machaber, who allows you to put it into water, into a cup, which the Ramah forbids, by the way. The Ramah forbids you to put ice into an empty cup, only into a cup that has water already, right? As we said yesterday. But if you want to talk about doing it with your hands, actually squeezing it, we said it's forbidden according to the Machaber. So using soap is going to be forbidden. However, you have to remember that we said yesterday that there are two reasons that it's forbidden to melt ice. Two reasons. One is what we just said, that you're creating the water. What's the other reason? Squeezing fruit. Exactly, like squeezing fruit. Now, fruit is something that you might expect to squeeze. If it's a type of fruit that you expect, that you people squeeze. Grapes, olives, and even oranges today and whatever. Ice is something you would expect also to become water because it melts and becomes water. Soap, if you melt it, it'll become water. But if you don't, it'll just sit there forever, basically. So it's really not like mashkin shazov. It's really not like liquids that come out of fruit, because that's expected. The ice is expected. This is only if you make it happen, only if you do it. So therefore, yesh makom lahakel. Maybe we don't have to be strict about it. On the other hand, if you look at it from the perspective of moilid, of creating something new, after all, you are creating something new. So
how does the soap turn to liquid? You put it in water, right? By rubbing it doesn't just turn to water.
Right, raw
so if you
water.
Put it in water, that's like putting ice in water, right?
But ice and water, we said there's different opinions, but in fact, you're not supposed to actually actively melt the ice even in water. If you have ice and water, you're not supposed to stick your hand in and crush it. Although we had a machlokas about that too, because since what you're crushing is not noticeably visible, some say even if you do it actively, it's mutter. But we said it's better to be strict. So actually, you're right. According to the opinion that says you're allowed to actively crush ice in water, you would be allowed to use soap, hard soap, with water, because the soap is mixing in with the water. So, in fact, the Ramah says in Siman Shin Chavav to be strict and not to use hard soap because of the issue of moilid. And like I said yesterday, some are lenient. Shilta Gebarim is lenient because he says the whole thing about squeezing fruits. It's not similar to that. But Mishnah Berurah and Alter Rebbe both recommend to be strict. Now, the other issue, before I get to the Yalkut Yosef and so on, other issue is about memachik. Memachik is one of the 39 malachas. What's memachik? When they were making leather, we know there's 11 malachas that have to do with sidur de pas. You all know about that? There's 39 malachas. You all know? We're learning for Shabbos, so you should know in case I never mentioned. There's 39 malachas. 11 of them have to do with making bread. And they are,
Okay.
start from the beginning.
Zoreh.
Actually, the Gemara puts, actually, so yeah. If it actually puts planting first, then plowing, yeah, go ahead. Plowing, planting, harvesting.
Lashing.
What's after harvesting?
Take out
Threshing, crushing the grain. Crushing the grain so you can get out what's inside? Dosh.
I was saying pulling it out of the ground.
That's called harvesting. In English, that's called harvesting.
So what was that too?
No. Plowing, planting, harvesting, threshing,
Winnowing.
winnowing. Thank you very much. Zoreh l'ruach. Selecting.
Bar.
Boyer.
Zeichen.
Grinding.
Lashing.
Marakid.
Marakid. Thank you very much. I almost forgot about that. Marakid. Sifting.
This is with the water.
Lash.
Lush.
Lashing.
And
Okay.
baking or cooking.
That's 10.
I thought there was 11.
I think there's 10. I think there's 10. It's like a song and a reference to something else.
Amalgamation, sifting, grinding.
You have that?
I have 11 right here.
Oh, yeah.
You have 11?
Yes.
Okay, tell me, please.
Okay, sure. Since the beginning.
From the beginning, yeah.
Horesh,
Yeah,
Soraya,
yeah,
Kotzai,
yeah,
Maamer.
yeah. Oh, Ma'amer, we forgot Ma'amer. Ma'amer is bundling, gathering into bundles.
Got it, yes.
Thank you very much. That's it, 11. All right. Then we have, of course, the ones that have to do with making garments, right? How many of them are those? Let's see if we can figure it out.
Dying.
First is shearing from the animal.
Correct.
That's called goizes. Then you have to clean the wool. That's called melaben. Then you have to comb it. That's called menapates.
Yes.
Then you have to make it into threads. That's called toive. Then you have to set up the loom. That's called mesach. Then you have to put them through. The loom is what you weave on, where the threads go this way and that way.
Wheel.
No. A wheel is to spin it into thread.
Oh, so what's the
A loom is where you have the horizontal threads and the vertical threads, up, down, back and forth, up, down, back and forth. You know what I'm saying? We don't really see these things. When you put it through the eye of the loom, and then when you actually do the weaving, then if sometimes you have to, like, I don't remember all of them.
That's not in with to warp for the purpose of weaving.
Yeah, that's weaving. Warp and woof is weaving. I don't remember all of them. Anyway, then we have the ones that have to do with making leather. Actually, you know what? I have it here. Goizes, malabin, menapitz, teveya, toive, meseth, oise, bodanirin. Oyek Petzea Koisher Mater. Toifer Korea. So that's all about making threads, making garments. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 about making leather. Sod is trapping. Shoichet is slaughtering. Mafshit is skinning. Ma'abed is tanning the leather. Machik is smoothing the leather. Masartet is scoring it, so you'll be able to cut it right. And machatich is actually cutting it. Okay. So to smoothen the leather is mamachik. To make any hard surface smooth, for making it rough to smooth, is mamachik. If you sand down, a rough surface, that's mamachik. Mimareach is if you take a surface that's pliable and you make it smooth from rough, is similar to mamachik, and it's also an isur d'oraisa. So to take beeswax, right, and smooth it, if it's rough, that's an isur mamachik. It's an isur d'oraisa of mamachik. So, sorry? Vaseline, yeah. So the question is, perhaps using soap has an isur mamachik as well. That's the opinion of Tiferes Yisrael and the Mishnayos, that using a hard soap is an isur mamachik, because maybe it's going to have a rough surface, and then maybe you're going to smooth it, and it's going to have a hard, smooth surface. However, the poskim question how that applies today. Nowadays, usually when you're finished using soap, it's pretty smooth. And when you use it, it's also smooth. Maybe in between it gets a little bit rough and smooth, but it's not really, there's no real noticeable point at which it's rough. And they suggest maybe the soap that they had in the olden days was different than the soap we have now. It wasn't as hard. It was maybe softer, and therefore when you were finished, it didn't look so smooth. And when you used it, you would take off a layer and it would look smoother. So it's not so clear how mamachik applies, how mamareach applies. But nevertheless, that's what the Tiferes Yisrael says, and that's accepted by Ashkenazim at least as the halacha, not to use hard soap. Like I mentioned yesterday, the Yalkut Yosef says that me'ikar hadin, you are allowed to use hard soap, because he says that we can rely on the opinion that's of the Shiltei Gebarim, that there is no issue with soap, because it's not like squeezing fruit, because soap does not automatically become liquid like ice becomes water. And remembering also what we said, what you just mentioned before, that when you're doing it into water. So it's never really going to be noticeable on its own. That's another reason to be lenient. As far as mamachik is concerned, we said it's not so clear that it's really an issue with mamachik at all. Nevertheless, he says the machmir tover labracha, person who does not use that soap. What about using liquid soap? Liquid soap, yay or nay? All in favor, say aye. It's
very liquidy, not like a cream.
If it's very liquidy, for sure. If you mix it in with water so that it's like water, there's no question about it. I'm talking about the regular dish soap. Allowed or not allowed?
Soap or hand soap?
Is there a difference?
What's the question?
Dish soap or hand soap? Dish soap is a lot thicker.
Dish soap is.
Really?
No. Dish soap? Sure.
Really?
The dish soap.
Hand soaps are
10
creamy,
times.
I don't know.
What's the category that has to fall into? Not hard? Hard becomes the issue when you take something hard like a bar soap, like a beeswax, for Vaseline.
See which is more viscous. Okay, there's different ways of measuring viscosity. Like you can drop a ball into the soap and see how fast it falls. Okay, but it doesn't tell me what which soaps are the more viscous ones. I don't know. If it's liquid hand soap in one of these plastic pump containers, you have to definitely add water. So here's the thing. I'm not sure what's more viscous, if it's their soap or hand soap. But the point is that some say, specifically the Tzos HaShulchan says, Ram Chaim now says, there's no issue with liquid soap. What should the issue be? Memachik. I mean, what surface is there that you're being memachik? There's no surface at all. The entire soap becomes, it just blends into the water and it disappears. It doesn't really disappear. It goes into the drain pipe and maybe causes trouble for the fish. Who knows? But it's gone. There's no smooth surface that's created. So what's the issue? Then he says, well, what about the fact that you're making bubbles? You're making bubbles. Maybe that's an issue of moiled, exactly. You're creating something new when you use.
The bubble is gone. It's not.
Temporary.
So he says something that's so temporary that comes and goes. It's logical to say that it's not an issue of moiled. The poskim also say the same thing, by the way, about making seltzer. Right? You can add Alka-Seltzer to water on Shabbos, and the water starts bubbling, right? Making bubbles. They say those bubbles are nothing. They come and go. It's not important. So he says the same thing about these bubbles. Now, by the way, the Shmir Shabbos recommends that adults not play with bubbles on Shabbos. When your kids want to make bubbles, he says you can let the kids do it, and they can rely on the fact that the bubbles are not long-lasting. And you can also rely on the fact that the bubbles are not long-lasting as far as washing, your hands or whatever. But he says for an adult to actually make bubbles, better not. Because, yesh leimer, maybe it is moiled. So when you're doing it in a way that's not on purpose, we're mekel. But the dafka do it on purpose, he recommends not to. Although by the seltzer you are doing it. That's what you want to do. You want to make that drink. Nevertheless, he recommends not to play with bubbles.
What do you call it? Bubbles? Just mixing the ingredients together.
You're causing bubbles. You're creating bubbles.
The bubbles was in the container. Just mixing with water.
What container? When you put in an Alka-Seltzer pill into the water, there's no bubbles in the Alka-Seltzer pill. In the water, there's no bubbles. You put them together, and you make bubbles. I don't really drink Alka-Seltzer, but I think that's what happens.
You bring Coke, and sometimes you have this common cup ready to pump.
Yeah, there is bubbles already in the Coke, and it's more bubbles.
But there's no common cup.
Okay, it's more bubbles. It's more. No, it's just more bubbles. It's more bubbles. You're not creating something new. I hear what you're saying, but it's I don't think the idea of the carbonation is already there. The carbonation is already there. Sorry? Same thing. They say you are, because the bubbles they come and go. They don't last. Right. Add carbon dioxide. As carbon dioxide, it's not. It's just a mineral. It's not a physical thing. No, we don't have to put it on mute. Too much noise. Okay. So, sorry? I'm not reading. Torah Shabbat Peh. Torah Shabbat Peh. This is actually in Shin Chavav. This discussion is in Shin Chavav. About soap. About soap. Yeah.
What is it that have like in the culture for Shabbos?
Oh, so what's the whole Shabbos soap about? This comes, it's not just about money. It has some merit.
What's that notice in Shabbos?
What's Shabbos soap? Shabbos soap is diluted dish soap. That's what it is. Of course you can do it yourself. Just like you can make the B'dikas Chametz kiss yourself, and you can make the Chanukah menorah yourself, and can you make your salt water for the Seder yourself? Or you can buy. Absolutely, you can buy salt water. Believe it or not. You can buy ready-made Seder plates. Everything on the plate already. This is the new world we're in. So anyway, the point is that you can buy Shabbos soap. What is the point of the soap? That they mix in the dish soap, of course with the hechsher. They mix the dish soap with water. Sorry? That I don't know. This I don't know. The point is, I don't know if it is. Very limited market. Although they have Shabbos toothbrushes now. You know, like rubber, so it doesn't really absorb water.
What absorbs water?
The regular toothbrush, the fibers are very close. It could absorb water.
Absorb or
Not really absorb, like hair, hold water. So they make rubber ones that don't. Anyway, why not? No, if you brush it every day, you're not going to cause bleeding. There's different reasons, but
you know you're gonna cause bleeding and all that.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so Lamaisa, where does it all come from? It has to have some basis. The Shabbos soap. So it's actually based on the opinion of Reb Moshe. Reb Moshe says, we don't know exactly at what point we stop worrying about memachik. In other words, a solid surface we know has memachik. That's in the Mishkan with leather. We know a pliable surface also has memachik. We had it in Siman Shin Yudalid with beeswax, right? Issues of putting wax into it to plug a hole and so on. So, on the other hand, obviously, at some point, there is no such thing at all. You know, with water, obviously, there's no surface at all. But something that has some thickness to it, that does hold its form for some time, it's hard to know where memachik stops. For some time, yeah, of course. Water, almost immediately, you pour it, it's gone. You don't see it holding its form at all. The things that actually do hold their form in general, like creams, that if you squirt them out on the table, they sit there, they don't become flat. That for sure has memachik, or memareach. It's called memareach, it's not called memachik at that point. But here, it will become flat, but it takes time. Not right away. That's what we mean. It has viscosity. It has some thickness. So Moshe says maybe we can do a test, but it's definitely going to hold its form for half a second. I don't know. Okay. Moshe says, I actually didn't see it inside, but I've the svara that is quoted in the name of Moshe is that there is no shear that is clearly stated in the poskim. At one point, we stop worrying about memachik, and therefore he recommends not to use any kind of soap that is thick. Not just hard soap, but even liquid soap, if it's thick, not to use it.
Even hand soap's thick.
Okay? So according to him, you shouldn't use it. Now, on the other hand, if you want to dilute it on Shabbos, you can. Just like you can add ice to water on Shabbos. He said you can do that, even though it's gonna dissolve. You can dilute it on Shabbos, and it's gonna dissolve from its viscous state into its watery state. That's okay. The post can even say if you want to shake it and help it dissolve faster, that's also mutter. Even though we said before that you're not really supposed to actively crush ice in water, but here this is not like crushing ice in water. This is like mixing. This is like mixing the water with ice. David Lev, you were asking yesterday, I think. If you have ice and water, are you allowed to mix the ice and the water like this? You were asking it yesterday? I think you were? You were asking? So he says that it's mutter. He says that it's mutter. It's not considered to be a dime because it's really the water that's doing it. You're just helping.
What said the next word is, what was the word? What did you say the word? This, there was what was the scientific word for it?
Oh, that was talking about the heat. That was thermodynamics. You're adding kinetic energy into heat. Potential kinetic heat to help it melt more. You know, you're adding heat to it, like stirring. They said the negative.
So kinetic thermodynamics is allowed on Shabbos while mixing.
Sounds good.
Mixing your,
Sounds good. There's hope for Ma'ariv. There's hope.
One more, Rabbi. Your neighbor.
One more. Let me text him.
Mazel tov. Finally, we have for the Spirat HaOmer. The fourth day. Can you say? Baruch Hashem.
Why do you get 2 more?
You're asking too much.
if you're gonna get 2, get 3.
Yes. You can bring all your sitting out here. You can do mitzvah every day.
I want to text Joseph.
Is he online?
No, he's not. All the more reason for him to come. All right, Rabbi Sai. So that's the bottom line.
I was asking. He's saying that the heat, because you're like more. It's more like the adayim making it. Why is that not actively making it melt? Why is that not like taking ice and going like this when you're using? I forgot the word he used. Kinetic, cosmic, whatever word he used.
Kinetic thermodynamics, but I don't know what that means.
Sounded like a lot of stirring going on. So you stirring, so the ice melts. Let's say you don't want to have ice or blocks the passage of the water pitcher. You want to melt it, and let's say you're melting the sugar and you're making big lemonade or something, and you want the ice to melt. That would be allowed actively wanting to melt the ice, or just mixing something without actively wanting to melt the ice allowed.
1 second, sorry, I just was distracted. How many actually daven Ma'ariv?
I did not.
You davened? You davened. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4,
You daven?
not 5. You davened, Michal?
I did not.
Not 1, not 2, not 3, not
That's what I'm
4, not 5.
That's exactly what I asked.
With him, we have 6. Make sure, we have to make sure.
He usually davens, right?
Maybe.
Maybe he doesn't daven.
I usually do that, yeah.
Okay. So the story goes.
Maybe that's only for also.
No,
You need someone who didn't daven.
no, all
No.
this here is no diving.
Not 1, not 2, not 3, 4, not 5, not 6. You didn't daven. You didn't. So if David Leib didn't daven, we have. Yeah.
So my question is.
Your question is, go ahead.
If you're mixing on having in mind to be able to melt the ice. Is that allowed?
Yes.
If you're mixing to melt the ice.
Yes. It's still not considered that you are doing it directly. You are helping the water do it. I mean, it seems very small difference, but I won't prove it to you, but I'll support that psak based on the common minhag of making coffee on Shabbos. Does anybody know anybody who is machmer not to make coffee on Shabbos?
I don't like to drink coffee.
You don't drink coffee. No, I went once on a Shabbaton, and I saw there was a rabbi there making coffee essence. I said, coffee essence? Erev Shabbos. I said, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, coffee essence, you know. There's still shy, and at the end of the day, there's still shyless. I make coffee essence. That's what he does. So anyway, but 99% of the Jewish people that I know of make coffee either sheni, shlishi, however they make it. They make it. Or sugar. Even if you make coffee essence, what about sugar? Right. No, but I'm asking not about the bishul. I'm asking about the melting of the sugar when you pour the hot water on it. You mamish pour the hot water on the sugar, you're melting it biyadayim. Mamish biyadayim. I'm talking about if you pour the hot water onto the sugar. If you pour the hot water onto the sugar, what is the heter? Why is that not like, I mean, we said before you can't do it with salt. We said you can't wash your hands with salt if that's going to melt the salt. Sugar and salt are no different. I mean, they're both solid things that are melting and becoming liquid. Coffee, cocoa. What's the difference? It's a difference. If that's moilid, who said moilid doesn't apply to food? And over here, I'm gonna melt the ice. I'm gonna drink it. What if? I'm saying you're not gonna melt the ice even if you want to drink it, if it's done in a way that's moilid. So basically, we see that using water for some reason is not the same as doing a biyadayim mamash. Biyadayim, that's considered moilid. With water is considered not so much. I don't know why. It's hard to understand the swara. The water's doing it, and you're pouring the water. So what? I mean, why is that not biyadayim? But I'm saying we see that people do it. It's accepted. It seems like moilid mamish has to be actually biyadayim. Sorry? I believe the Alter Rebbe in the siddur. Pass me, please. Yeah, please. No, the top.
I have no problem. I'm not drinking sugar anymore.
Baruch Hashem. Much healthier.
Everybody says, no sugar, no sugar, no sugar. Everybody is surprised. I got used to it for maybe 1 or 2 years already.
Kol hakavod.
And by the way, I don't drink coffee anymore. Only tea with no sugar. And the last Shabbat, Rabbi, only had water with no tea and no.
I mean, it's hard to make a diak from here, but the Alter Rebbe does say in the siddur, "Le'lishboch bekli rishon shayad seledes b'al zucker." It's mashma. It's only a kli rishon that's a problem. Kli sheni, it's mashma. It's not a problem. It's the mashmos.
Because of bishul?
I mean, because of bishul. I'm saying, well, what about moiled? If moiled is a problem, then you shouldn't be allowed to do it at all. Exactly. Mashmo. He allows with the cliche. The loy lishbech bekli rishon sheyal tzeleres ba'alat zucker. Mashma cliche is okay. That's the mashmos. So.
Is there any sort of reason that it's so small?
What do you mean? The amount of sugar is so small?
No, each piece is.
Each piece? So why is it different than salt? Okay, so the bottom line is Misha Rotzela Achmir. He's supporting the Shabbos soap makers. Nothing wrong with that. And even if you want to make it on Shabbos, that's also an option. Okay.
Good. We are 6.
Okay, good. I'm going to tell Yosef he responded. Elchanan did not respond. No, Yosef didn't daven yet. Yosef davened already. Excuse me.
Good pray. He was the Asiri.
7. From 7 didn't done.
What is the 7? Include you?
לא, עם העשירי שלא יתברר, יש להם 7,
That's 7. All this didn't done.
כן, עם
So it's 7.
העשירי.
No, he is pray. He pray.
No, he did. He did? Are you sure? Oh.
It's okay. Yosef says he'll come anyway. Okay. Now, what about making ice on Shabbos?
For use on
Making ice on Shabbos for use on Shabbos.
I have no problem with that.
You have no problem. Okay. Your opinion is that it's mutter.
I think so. No, it's makel.
You shouldn't even use
is-
your
is
ice even your
Ashkenazi-
making
Rabbi.
Shabbos. You shouldn't use it.
Why not?
If it's something done on Shabbos, and you basically have to, if you want to use the ice, you have to stop the ice maker to be able to use whatever you have.
No.
So you disagree with him. You say not only can't you do it, but even if it happened automatically, you didn't do it, it's still also, you're saying.
I wasn't talking about ice maker.
This one we call.
I have those trays.
The old-fashioned
Plastic.
things.
The
I had an
plastic.
ice maker until whatever. Anyways, I can't take out my ice from my ice maker on Shabbos. So I
Because
have
it
that.
makes it go.
There's no way. It's not like there's not a.
Oh, it's only electric.
Yeah.
But for a guest,
So how do you eat the chamin then?
I never understood why for a guest you can make with your own family you can't. But
Okay.
Rabbi, I know the Ashkenaz machmir. The Sephardim, it's okay. Some of the Chabadnik, they don't do it, but not all of them.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you the two opinions. La bocher yivchar. Okay, so there was a big Rav in Yerushalayim, who originally came from Chebin. Chebin. Definitely in Europe. If I had to guess, I would say Poland, but I'm not 100% sure. Reb Dov Beresh Wiedenfeld was his name. He lived in Shari Chesed, and he was big Talmud Chacham. He lived, before the war, during, after a little bit, and he was a big person. And he wrote a sefer called Doivev Mesharim, and he says that you're not allowed to make ice on Shabbos. This is obviously only a question that came up within the past 100 years or so when they came up with the whole idea of having freezers. Until then, you couldn't make ice. I mean, I guess you could if you took water from inside your house and put it outside, but it was never discussed al kapanim. And then they had freezers and they started making ice. So we had this question. So he says you're not allowed. Why not? So first of all, we have to preface this entire discussion and say that if you say the issue with squeezing ice is that it's like squeezing the fruit to make the liquid, obviously making ice is no problem. You understand? Because squeezing ice to make liquid is like squeezing fruit to make juice, maybe. But taking water and making ice has nothing to do with squeezing fruit. You understand? It's like reversing. It's like making fruit out of juice, which you can't even do. So there's no issue according to those who shine it. It's only an issue according to the Sefer Truma who says moiled. Comes along
To make ice.
moiled, no. The Sefer Truma says that to make water from ice is moilid. Understand? The Ran and the Ramban say that it's about squeezing fruit to make liquid. If you could squeeze ice to make water, you might come to squeeze juice to make liquid because they're similar. So that's obviously not going to apply here, right? The whole thing is not shaykh. But when it comes to the idea of moilid, maybe it is moilid, and he says it is. Why? Here's his svara.
What's Sefer Truma?
Sorry?
Sefer Truma said.
Sefer Truma is the one who holds of the issue of moilid. He's the one who holds of it. So he's saying, according to that
Not
opinion,
molid. It's water. Water is that the ice is going to be melted anyway, so it's not molid. It's not like a table you molid.
the table is not moilid.
But the ice,
Table,
we
table
said before.
table is boina maybe. Table is not
We
moilid.
said before it's ice. Yeah, if you put it outside, it's melted. It doesn't really mold it.
We said before that to take ice and make it into water is moilid. That's what we said before.
But it's not really because
Agree or not agree?
Yeah, I agree.
That's what we said. Maybe you don't like it, but that's what we said.
No, I agree.
Now we said that maybe you can do it if it's not biyadayim. Maybe you can do it if you just put it in the cup. But biyadayim for sure it's moilid, according to the Sefer Truma at least.
Yes.
So here's the thing. Says the Shabina Rav. When you think that you're going to melt ice and make it into water. So in the halachas of Tuma and Tahara, that ice or that water, or that snow is already considered water. Just thinking about it already makes it into water, halachically. So he says, if when you take ice and make it into water, which it's already water al pi halacha, as soon as you think that it's going to be water, it's already water al pi halacha. Nevertheless, to make it into water is considered moilid. How much more so when you take water and make it into ice, which is not a halachic thing. Thinking it's going to be ice doesn't make it into ice. So you're actually creating something new by making ice. So therefore, he says it should be moilid. Now, I do want to point out, as I'm saying this, I'm wondering if it's maybe only according to the Ramah, his argument, not according to the Mechaber. Because the Mechaber says you're allowed to make water out of ice if you don't do it biyadayim, if you just leave it there and it melts on its own. So yeah, I'm not actually making the ice, I'm putting it in the freezer and it's becoming ice. So I think maybe his whole thing is only according to the Ramah. According to the Ramah's opinion of the Sefer Truma. We're getting pretty narrow makam lahachmir here. But nevertheless, that's the Chabina Rav's opinion, that you are creating a new entity by making ice. Now, Reb Shlomo Zalman in the Shmir Shabbos Kol Chasai has a long ha'ara in which he questions the svara of the Chabina Rav. And he says, first of all, maybe when you make ice, it's not a significant action because ice is not going to stay ice. When you make water out of ice, which is the more natural state of water to be liquid, I mean, at least in this world where, normal room temperatures are not freezing. So the normal state is to be water. So when you liquefy ice into water, you're actually creating something significant, something lasting. But when you turn it into ice, it's not a real, it's like a temporary state. Especially if you're doing it in your freezer, which is like not a natural, normal kind of environment. It's a superficial, man-made, created environment. So it's like being artificially sustained as ice. You have this, something is making it be ice. If the electrical grid would go out, that's it would melt. It's like that shows that it's not a real entity. The fact that you have to keep it cold, you have to work on keeping it cold. That means it's not like a normal thing that is just what it is. In addition, he says, maybe, water is an important thing. So therefore, when you create water, maybe that's moiled. But when you create ice, which is not as important as water, I mean, obviously, if you're making it, you want it. You wouldn't make it if you don't want it. But generally, it's not as important as water. Water you drink, water you use for cooking, for washing. Ice you just use for cooling things off. It's not as important an item as water. So maybe they didn't make the Gzeira of Moiled for making something less important. Maybe they only made it for making something more important. Basically, he questions this whole chiddush of the Tribina Rav, and he says, listen, the Talmud Chacham already paskined, I don't want to argue on him. But b'makom tzoyrech, in a case of need, you can be mekel. And that's where what you're saying probably came from. I didn't see him saying specifically guests, but that's the idea. If it's a tzoyrech, you have guests and you want to serve them nicely, and with that ice, it's going to be warm drinks. Okay, tzorech, makom tzorech. It's not specifically about guests. Meaning to say, if your guest is very hamish and he doesn't care, maybe it's not a tzorech. And if you have a very big family and they're very makbid on having cold drinks, maybe it is a tzorech. You know what I'm saying? It's not specifically guests. It's the idea of makom tzorech. There's a need for it. That's the idea.
It's for your guests.
No, it's talking about Shabbos morning. You know you have guests coming for lunch and you realize you forgot to make ice. That's what we're talking about. Question?
Yeah, is there a big Ashkenazi Rav that allows it, really? It doesn't sound like Ashkenazi has much space to me.
Big Ashkenazi Rav who allows it clearly.
The Rav said it on his Friday, it should be fine. So I have my next question. Does Ramosha speak about it?
1 second, let me just look at the end of this hour. V'chein hoyer leheter arrived the brisk hagrash zelig zatzal. I don't know who this is because the Brisker Rav was not zelig, but the Rav of Brisk, other than the Brisker Rav, some other Rav, allowed it. Okay, there you have it. To make ice. So the Shmir Shabbos Lamaisa paskins that you can do it b'shas hatzoyer. Okay, now.
What's I'm saying, like guests or tzorech. Tzorech sounds like you have hot water. You can't serve guests hot, like warm water. I don't know. I don't know. What's the tzorech?
What's the tzorech, you ask? Oh, I take it back. Im yesh tzorech gadol bakach. Tzorech gadol. What's tzorech gadol? In this ha'ara, he doesn't explain what tzorech gadol is.
One example of tzorech?
The whole ha'ara is lamdas about why it shouldn't be us in the first place, and that even though b'machmer lechatchila because ha'razakin, but really he says it should be mutar min adin, but then he doesn't actually give examples of tzorech gadol. But he says,
why did he humble himself in front of the
Shabina
Rav and not just say? I mean, according to what he's saying, it's that he's choilek on the Zelig Brisk. Zelig Brisk is also has a nice opinion that it's allowed.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that already had become accepted. Maybe that became accepted. He didn't want to be mekel against the minhag.
I'm saying, what?
I grew up in my house. We never made ice on Shabbos, ever. On the other hand, my father-in-law allows it. Rabbi Cohen, he's Rosh Hashiva in Melbourne, Australia. And they make it only for Shabbos. They don't, not for after Shabbos, but if they need it, they make it for Shabbos.
What's the common minhag amongst Ashkenazim?
I think general people are machmer. Generally, I believe so. Yeah.
An ice that was made already?
Oh, what about ice that was made? What if you put it into the freezer right before Shabbos?
I think okay.
And it freezes on Shabbos, so you didn't do any moilid, but is there an isser of noilad? Is it considered muktzah as noilad? Right? Or the same question is about an ice maker. Obviously, it has to be an ice maker that works automatically, that if you take out, you're not causing it to make more, whatever. So
every ice maker works like
that you do cause it to make more?
you take out, it's causing it to make more because
No, you could probably turn a button or whatever.
No, Rabbi, it doesn't make cold or hot. It's the water when is fill up the plastic over there. When it's ice, it's a drop, and then you open and water. It's automatically just there.
I understand, but when it's full, it stops making, and when you take out, it starts to make again.
Sees the bin is empty.
It doesn't keep on making once it's full.
Making.
When it's full, it stops.
All depends if you have
lifts.
you have a box to stop it. Here I have a box to stop it. You just drop it on the floor.
Okay, whatever.
On the bucket.
Whatever. If it's not stopping, then he says you're allowed to. Shlomo Zalman.
Yeah, I moved that the plastic. I put a bucket.
Where? Near your freezer?
In the freezer, but not a nice one, small bucket.
It's a nice one.
Plastic one, and all the time it's dropping.
Those ice makers
Never
that
stop.
you're talking about, they do it automatically and stop.
Otherwise, you will be
There's a problem
stop
because
it, right?
If it's on the door or near the door, when you open the
You
freezer
create more.
door, it normally stops it. Even though your lights are off,
You have a question about that.
there's going to be a switch inside the door frame or something that stops it. So you usually have to disconnect or turn off the ice maker before Shabbos.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, I don't have an ice maker now, but the one I had didn't work that way. But I hear.
I think you're right. I had to pull one once. The front, the plug for the connector.
Yeah, either that or sometimes there's a switch.
Right.
Because in my
Rabbi,
freezer,
if
when you open the door,
if
there's a link
if
that
it's
goes
not
across.
stopping, it dropping in the
So you
bucket,
close the
in
door.
plastic, it's
The
okay.
next- the
Because
light
it's
goes
less,
into the little
don't
hole,
stop it
and
when
it
it's full
works.
up, and then
Open
if I
it,
take it, that's
disconnect
okay.
the switch.
it's better,
So
right?
turn it off.
Yeah.
You close it, goes back on. So you can't have that on at any time, that's the off continuously.
The bottom line of Shlomo Zalman says that you can do it. It's not noilid. It's only a shaila of moilid. You can use the ice that the ice maker made.
Even on Shabbos?
Even on Shabbos.
It made on Shabbos?
It made on Shabbos. Because he said ice is not considered noilid. Moilid maybe, according to Shabbat Rav. Noilid not. Why? He says because we don't find, even though we discussed yesterday machlokes about snow, but he says we don't find that snow is muktzah, even though it is created in the clouds right before it descends. In the clouds, it's water. It doesn't form as a snowflake until right before it descends. As it comes down, the same is true of hail. And he says we don't see in Chazal that these things are muktzah. So we see that it's not considered noilid. Moilid maybe, noilid not.
Otherwise, you will not
Other
talk.
things, like you have-
One second. I just want to point out, noilid and moilid are two different things. So even though it sounds funny, if it's not noilid, why is it moilid? They're two different things. Noilad and moilid, two different things. They're both derabanan, but they're two different things. Noilad is an isser of muktzah, and that is that something that changed its form in a significant way is considered like something new on Shabbos, and it's a muktzah issue. And then there's moilid, which is not to create something new. It's a different. Each one has its own categories and its own descriptions and so on and so forth. Even though it's the same word, But noilad and moilad are not actually the same thing, and they don't always go together. Yes?
What about other things that you put in the freezer, like milk in the freezers, or, I don't know, things that normally would not be frozen, such as milk. Ice cream, you keep frozen, so that's how you normally keep it.
Yeah.
But also things like bread, although bread doesn't really freeze that way, but we put bread in the freezer and take it out, let's say Shabbos morning, and let it, so you have it for lunch.
Well, bread is a solid the whole time.
Right.
Bread is not an issue. Anything that's a solid makes no difference. Although David is asking about the little icicles that form on the challah when you, yeah, but that's a small amount. That's not significant.
I'm thinking more of things like milk or juice that will freeze. Vodka doesn't, I know that from experience, but
So, as far as milk is concerned, he brings here in the Dirshu, he doesn't talk about freezing milk, he talks about defrosting milk.
right.
Shemel?
No, my question really is, can you use it if it's already frozen?
Well, obviously you have to defrost it. It's frozen. So you're talking about defrosting milk, which is exactly what he talks about. He says that Reb Shlomo Zalman allows it. Why? Because, listen to this.
To defrost something and use it?
To defrost milk and use it. Listen to his svar.
Just milk or any other liquid?
I don't know about any other liquid, but his svara could apply to other liquids too. Let me tell you his svara. He says the svara is that milk is such an important thing that even when it's frozen, it's considered milk. Water, once it's frozen, who needs it?
Frozen water.
It's frozen water, but not going to go through the bother of melting it. You'll just get other water. There's so much water around.
If you ever know.
I'm saying in general, frozen water is not an important thing that you're necessarily going to defrost for the purpose of drinking. Maybe yeah, maybe no, but milk is an important thing. You're definitely going to defrost it. So therefore, he says it has a din of milk all along. So it's not like you're changing it. By ice cream, he says the exact opposite far. By ice cream, even if it melts, it's considered a food.
But, I want to ask you about ice cream. Said the ice cream, if it's meant completely, I think we learned like shouldn't use it, but it says it's doesn't form anymore. Like it's very liquid, you shouldn't use it.
Why?
This sort of thing we discussed in class. If it's come completely defrost, you should.
I mean, we've been learning that even.
So what will be the difference in ice cream and ice cream completely?
I don't think it's different. I don't remember saying that. But first of all, even though Lechatchila Ashkenazim should not defrost water and allow it to melt, but b'diavad, if it's done already, the Alter Rebbe says you can drink it. So the same thing should apply to ice cream. But he wants to say differently. He wants to say defrosted ice cream has a din of food, and therefore it's not even usher. That's his chiddush. Let me see if Rabbi Farkash agrees with him.
I would call that you shouldn't drink the water that melt, the ice that melt. There's no water with it. And the ice cream, before they said it was completely, you shouldn't eat it.
Let me see what Rabbi Farkash says. Glida. If it's a glida. We got Hilchos here. He says that you're allowed to melt ice cream l'tzorech.
So what?
Tzorech Shabbos.
So Shabbos?
Yeah.
The difference is just left it over there and there's no it. So then what you remember, oh, I didn't eat my ice cream.
That's for sure allowed because you didn't do it on purpose. But even lechatchila says you're allowed to do it l'tzorech Shabbos.
He says it's okay or not okay?
L'tzorech Shabbos is okay.
What would be a point of melting ice cream?
I don't know. I mean, normally you don't want to melt ice cream. you want it to melt a little bit. You don't want it to be like hard, like a block of ice. You want it to be like soft. But to melt it to liquid, I don't know what the tzorech would be.
Just take it out of the freezer and leave it at room temperature for a couple minutes.
Yeah, exactly. That's for sure okay, because you're not turning it into liquid. Okay. I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this. Except one other topic which I didn't bring up at all. And that is if you walk into the bathroom and you notice that in the toilet there's a piece of blue soap. And when you flush that toilet, the soap melts a little bit and colors the water. Are you allowed to flush the toilet or not? Unusual way?
How do you flush it unusual?
The blue thing?
Yeah.
Your intention
And the problem is to the water.
make it
It melts.
color.
Your intention is presumably not to color the water.
Yeah.
So then it's gonna be.
So what's your
Because
intention of
that's
putting?
dying.
So what's your intention of putting?
אין צובע באוכלים.
The intention of putting it is to clean it. You want to make it clean, smell, shouldn't smell bad.
There's not so long, but you can say it on coffee and tea that you're making if it's over.
Oh,
You know.
that's what I have.
Ain't tzviya ba'oichlin.
It's not-
This is not
Clean in the water.
this is not oichlin. Ain't tzviya ba'oichlin means that the dyeing of food is not significant because the color of the food is not important compared to the taste and the consistency and the everything else. Color, big deal. But if it's something that's edible but you're not eating it, then tzviya is shaykh. For example, let's say like the caterers,
Decorations.
exactly, the caterers are decorating. So if you're decorating with, they make these
Cutting up
fancy things, cut up fruit looking like birds.
statues and stuff.
They're not allowed to dye those things. Can't use food coloring or anything to dye those things because they're not eating them. So that is considered a forbidden dyeing. See what I'm saying? It's only when you're eating it, the change of color is not significant.
The water in the toilet.
Yeah.
You want to dispose of.
Yep.
You're not keeping it.
Yep.
Shouldn't that make a difference in the sense? In other words, no matter what color it is, you're still flushing it away.
On the other hand, you are putting it in there because you want it to do its thing.
Well, usually you don't care about the color. Usually the thing is that you want it to do, or whoever put it in, is the odor.
Oh.
And
So actually, Rav discusses this, and he says that if you don't have any intention for the color, meaning to say the color is incidental. It so happens that it's blue, but I don't want it to be blue, Dafka. I went to the store. They didn't have any clear ones. I got a blue one, big deal. If you, Dafka, wanted blue, why would you want it blue? Because you like the blue color. Looks nice. Looks like a fancy toilet. That's the problem, he says, because then the tzviya is bekavana. If it happens to be blue, but you don't care about it really, then he says it's mutter, because that tzviya is not important. As far as the fact that you're dissolving the soap into the water, it's being done by water. It's not directly, and it's mixing into the rest of the water and so on. So there's also makam lahaka for that. Although as I'm talking, I'm remembering there's a whole nother shaila with flushing water nowadays, or with using a faucet nowadays. A lot of homes now have electric water meters. Electric water meters. Every single time you use any water in your house, if you have an electric water meter, that water is being measured. What you use and what goes down the drain. It's being measured. You pay twice, by the way. You pay for usage and sewage.
Yeah.
If you take it and throw it outside, you don't pay the second one. Anyway, the bottom line is now. I'm sorry?
His septic tank, so you don't pay the.
Oh, you don't pay it in
No.
Machaya. Except when it overflows, then you're in trouble.
The tank has to be empty.
How does that?
The
Septic
tank,
tank.
no, the company comes.
Show us something. Sure. Really? That's something.
You're on the old side of Diamond.
So here's the thing. In the old system, it's just mechanical. It's all recorded, but it's mechanical. And then they come and check it once a month. But nowadays, the companies, they don't want to spend the money sending a guy to check it. They want it all computerized, and therefore it's all electric. So what's the heter?
Isn't it actually electric? It's not connected, there's no battery.
What? There is somewhere in your water system, somewhere in your water system, there is one spot where the water all comes from. It's being measured by some sensor, and that sensor is tracking it in a computer system. And somewhere where the water is going down out of, it's also being measured and being tracked in the computer system.
I understand it's being tracked as it's going into your home.
Yep.
Okay, but I think the power basically is coming from the water itself. It spins.
I'm not talking about the power of the water. I'm talking about the tracking of the water.
Well,
They track how much water you use, and they do that now in some new homes electronically. It used to be mechanical, that
is it
something
tracked
turned.
continuously, or it's just tracked once a month?
No.
Electric
Of course,
meter,
it's
walk down the street.
no. They don't. That's the whole point. In the new places, they don't walk down the street anymore. It's tracked in a system in a computer, and the information goes to the system.
So the meter belongs to the city. They're not gonna be allowed to sell something that belongs to me. So
if somebody puts up a sensor that turns a light on every time you walk, say the same thing. They can't make it forbidden for me to walk.
The street is not mine.
What if it is yours? What if they put it onto your lawn? It's not mine. I mean, they have no right to make it usher. I'm just saying. If it's a malacha, I'm not saying it's a malacha.
Rabbi, we said something before.
It would seem that it's not your intention, but it is a psikresha. It's a sure thing.
Like open the door of the refrigerator and then they compress it with a
What?
See, the learn is like a one under something we say.
He said something.
Psikresha, that's a question. Is it learnichale or not? I mean, I guess it's learnichale because you don't want to pay. But the system in general is nichale. No, the system in general is nichale. You have a system that works, they supply you, and because of the system you're able to pay. I understand that, but the fact is the system is nichale. The details you don't care one way or the other, but it's not like the system itself is like nichale.
But
It will be the same thing with the electric. Some of the electric, you will cause the meter to move.
We're not gonna do that on Shabbos.
Yeah, you do the electric.
Sure, meter.
Yeah, the electric is also digital.
Also,
Yeah, but you don't use electricity on Shabbos. So
Right.
what is it?
Right, so it's not an issue, but it's the same.
Question?
We was mentioning something about, let's say the electric off,
If the electricity is off,
off on Shabbat.
Yeah.
After 5 minutes.
No,
it's
you're
on.
allowed.
You're falling for it.
Somebody turn off and on.
yeah, so what's your question?
So that's
he
okay.
says-
Every time you open up that refrigerator door,
Because they make
the
it,
person's not working. but
all
after
the
work,
neighbors, so we will, it's okay.
Yeah, because the neighborhood is not Jewish. Most people are not Jewish.
Yeah, that's
Not
what I
doing it
say.
for Jewish
You
people.
open it,
but also when you
Okay,
do-
Rabbi Isai,
when you open up
I read a whole
faucet-
article about it and about this question about water meters. And Lamai said they came up with that it should be mutter based on all the things you're saying. It's psikresha, le'nichale, drabanan. It's not your intention. It's not noticeable. It is no other option. That's also absolutely true.
Buckets and wells.
But
That's your option.
I don't remember all the details. But anyway, that was the maskana. Okay. Yes.
Water going into the house, not coming out.
Really?
They charge you the same, based on what's going in, they charge you.
Are you sure?
Yeah, if you wanna use the water to water your lawn, okay, you can put another meter in that measures the water that's going onto your lawn. That they don't charge you for the sewage. But you
Or
have
fill
to
a
have a
pool.
separate.
Fill the pool also.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
Yeah, you can call and say, I need to fill the pool.
I didn't know
The
that.
sewage on that.
most people. don't
I didn't know
do it,
that.
but Just use the water and fire them.
I didn't know that. Okay, it's good to know.
Same thing with your electric, they can do things like that where you have a meter for the main building, but if you have a little apartment, you can have a separate meter to measure, so you know how much to charge that person or.
I see. Interesting.
So
Okay, it's good to know.
We said that we will fill up the pool and we use that, so we'll be better.
Yeah, but
Same
eventually
price.
that pool water, it doesn't, not the part that evaporates, but the rest of it, you empty eventually into the sewer system.
No, it's you'll empty out in the street.
That's into the sewer system, as far as they're concerned.
Not in my
A
home.
fancy bucket from the fridge.
Most places don't allow you, by the way,
Yeah,
to do it on the
fancy,
street.
it's true.
And if they catch you, they fine you. That costs you more than what if you put it into the sewer system.
They catch me.
Yeah.
Why they catch me? Catch you.
All right, everybody say, let's get back to work.
It's uncatchable.
Okay. Tesvav. Also live for a sudar. Tesvav, back to the Shulchan Aruch. Tesvav, yeah? No, the big Shulchan Aruch. Back to the Chaber, yeah? Yeah? We're up to date in Alter Rebbe, yeah?
We are.
Also live for sudar, yeah, we're up to Chafalef in Alter Rebbe.
We did Chafalef, no?
No, we didn't do Chafalef. We're up to Chafalef, and we're up to the Chaber.
After Chafalef.
Tesvav. Also live for Surah Pi Achavis, live on Gaba Bakeli Shdel and Shema Yaval Reschita. Our beggar also live for Allah Mutter Shenachosh Allah Seichtoi. Okay, so now that we've discussed Mefarek in the context of squeezing grapes and olives, which is Nesa Daraisa, in the context of squeezing Tusim and Ramoinim, mulberries and pomegranates, which is Drabanan, we also discussed squeezing pickles, also Darabanan. What about squeezing liquids out of garments, out of clothing?
Schita.
Daraisa or Darabanan?
Schita is the one of the melachot.
What's this? Daraisa or Darabanan?
The right.
What are the clothing? Daraisa, why?
Schita is one of the melachot.
Sweet as number one.
Which one of the malachas?
We said wash.
Dash.
So there are two possibilities when it comes to squeezing garments. One is schita, which is a tulda of melaban. Melaban means to wash, to clean clothes. Part of the cleaning of clothes is to squeeze out the water after you clean them. Because if you don't squeeze out the water, I mean, all the dirt in the water is going straight back in and staying in there. You have to squeeze it out to effectively clean. So that's part of Malabin. It's Isur D'Oraisa. That's part of Malabin. We discussed this actually in Mission Bays. We had two. In addition to that, and this is why it's brought up in Shem Chaf, it could also be mefarek if you want that liquid. Okay? If you have some liquid absorbed in a garment and you want it, and you squeeze it out and you save it, that's mefarek, the oraisa. Now, if you squeeze it out and it goes li'ibud, that's not going to be mefarek, certainly not midaraisa, because that's not like regular mefarek where you save it. It's only going to be malabin.
Malabin's also on colorful clothing?
Yeah. In black. The thing about black and used and makbid is only if it's not actually full of water. It just has a little bit of dew on it or a little bit of dust on it. But if there's actually water in it, then malabin applies also to other garments. Although I think there are other opinions. Maybe there's one of the Rishonim that says only white. But it's not the halacha. It applies to anything. Okay, so with no further ado. So you're not allowed to spread a sudar, a cloth, on top of a barrel and put a keli on top of it, which might cause the, exactly, and then get absorbed with water. And then you might forget that it's forbidden and squeeze out the water, and therefore you're not allowed to do it in the first place. If it is the designated garment that you use to cover this barrel or barrels in general, then it's okay because it's not going to bother you if it gets wet. That's a normal thing for it to get wet. This is a thing, by the way, about spills. You're not supposed to absorb a spill with anything that you might be tempted to squeeze out. Anything that bothers you if it's wet, you should not use to absorb a spill because you might forget and squeeze it out. So you should use dafka rags because that's what they're for, or for that matter, napkins, which, anyway, they're one-time use things. There's no isser daraisa to squeeze them anyway. So that's the sort of thing you should use. But something that is not normally used to absorb a spill should not be used.
If it's going to be to cover the barrel, it shouldn't be a problem. Because I know in advance you're not going to get wet. So,
no, it might get wet, but if it's it's a beged miyucha. If it's made for it, then it doesn't bother you. That's the point. Even if it gets wet, it doesn't bother you. That's why it's allowed. Okay.
So but it doesn't like a barrel of wine, so it can be water, white wine, red wine. It doesn't say, it does say coffee. It doesn't say barrel of wine. It doesn't say it's talking about wine. It's talking in general.
So, since you brought up red wine or white wine or water, we should point out that there is a difference between them. Water is something that is malabin. Red wine is not malabin. Exactly. Red wine does not clean your garment. Nobody cleans with red wine. White wine, maybe. The Taz says that it's also malabin. Not everybody agrees. On white wine. White wine. The Taz says white wine is malabin. But red wine is not. So, on the other hand, there is still an isser of mefarek, but if you're not saving it, then it's only derabbanan. If you're not saving it, if it's going li'ibud, it's not midaraisa. So your question is, if it's red wine, maybe there's no gzeira.
Somebody got dirty with wine, they're going to be squeezing it.
Exactly. The Alter Rebbe spells that out Chaf Aleph. If it's red wine, it's mutter. Why? Because if you squeeze it out, it's not going to be an Issa D'Oraisa anyway. You're not cleaning it, and you're not saving that wine, so it's not an Issa D'Oraisa. Now, Midrabanan, you shouldn't squeeze it anyway, but we're not going to make a Gzeir that you shouldn't put it on in case you might squeeze it.
Well, I saw somewhere that, I don't know if it's the meaning of that. Let's say if you have the napkins and you have to clean wine or something red, you shouldn't use red napkins.
You shouldn't use red cloth napkins.
Yeah.
Disposable napkins are not a problem because you're throwing them out.
Oh, so
It's only a cloth napkin. You shouldn't use a red cloth napkin.
Is not a problem.
No, because that nobody colors them, nobody saves them.
So it's from the same reason.
If you use something red and you make it more red, maybe that's more like dyeing it. Maybe that's more like dyeing it. That's a chiddush. If you have a red cloth napkin and use it to absorb a red spill, maybe the color is good. Maybe you like the color. So that's it's more of a shayla of dyeing. Okay. I think Alter Rebbe mentions that actually. Okay. We did, but let's do a few in the Machaber before we go over to the Alter Rebbe. Asar lahadek moichen befi pach shesh b'mashkem shum schita. No, moichen is like rags. You have rags, and we're talking about rags that have water in them, that have absorbed water in them, and you want to push them into a hole, into the mouth of the bottle to close it up. But because they have liquids absorbed in them, when you push them in, that is squeezing out the liquids that's absorbed into them. That's a isser of mefarik. And this is even if it's red wine.
Even if your attention is not for spit at all.
It's a psikresha. It's a psikresha. Even if it's red wine, so it's not Issa D'Oraisa, it's Issa D'Rabbanan.
There's no some material because it's not your attention you're allowed to.
No, not in this case. In the next case, we're going to see maybe, but not in this case. In this case, it is considered asr. Sfoig. You cannot use a sponge to wipe with. Unless it has a beis achiza, as a decree that he might squeeze. The problem with using a sponge is that if the sponge becomes too full of liquid, then when you're even just picking it up, even holding it, is going to squeeze some of the liquid out of it. If the sponge has a beis achiza, that means the sponge has a handle, so then you could hold onto the handle without actually squeezing the sponge. So you can use the sponge to absorb, because once it's absorbed, even though you're still holding it, you're not gonna be squeezing it. That's opinion number one about the handle of a sponge. Opinion number two is as follows.
But you don't use sponge anyway. With achiza, no?
I've never seen a sponge with a beis achiza, but if you would have one, you would be allowed to use it.
There is.
Is there?
Yeah, you have like buckets or Walmart.
Sponge with a beis achiza. And what would you want to use it for?
In a table.
Use it for dishes.
No.
You should have the other one, the brush.
Here's the thing. You can't use it in a way that you are actually squeezing out of it. You can use it to absorb a spill, and once it's absorbed, you put it down. You can't use it to squeeze. So if you're going to wash dishes with it, it's going to be squeezing the whole time. That's how you wash dishes.
To clean a
It's
table,
only
okay?
used.
Otherwise, if you
absorb.
don't use it anyway, so it can just do something.
Absorb, but it's worthless because once it's absorbed, you can't squeeze it out. It's a one-time use, the whole Shabbos. So there's no point to it. That's the thing.
Rabbi, you have a big
Yes.
sponge and a little bit water, and if you put the sponge, the sponge is
It's also gzeira.
Xera. But
Xera.
if it's something to hold, it's okay.
Now, there is another opinion about this whole story with sponges and handles of the sponges. And according to this opinion, actually, you would be allowed to use a sponge with a handle for washing dishes on Shabbos.
Take a stick and you make a hole before Shabbat, and you put it all the way through, and then you hold it, and you're gonna go like this.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's a handle. Oh, shkaya, shkaya.
Okay, so go on.
So,
It's good make a difference if
What a big mitzvah you got.
the schita done and the word just go to Ibud, or you don't use the water, or
yeah, it's not going to be the Raisa. Not going to be the Raisa. It's also Rabban.
so there's no there's any ethics of those people using the sponge to wash dishes and the water when they're squeezing it, just go down the drain.
Lo Shamati. I've never heard of such a. There are people that use it, Shem Shabbos people. Lo Shamati. I don't think so.
I know the special one for Shabbos, the one that don't.
Okay, that's something else. Something else. Okay, so here's the thing about a sponge, my friend.
Kiddush.
Chiddush. Some say that the reason you can use a sponge with a handle is that when you have a handle on the sponge, then the sponge is no longer considered like a beged, which when it absorbs, it's what's inside of it is considered absorbed. When you squeeze it out, it's considered like you've done schita, you've taken something out from inside something else. When you have a handle on the sponge, they say, you've turned the sponge into a keli, and now it becomes like a cup. And it's a container that holds the liquid. And when it absorbs it, it's holding it. And when you squeeze it out, it's like using a cup.
Oh, who's saying it? Just curious.
Haravid Kosav, Shomea, Haravid Kosav, Dava Pikin Yevshla, and Makovra, Kivan Shishla Besachiza, Havali Kitzloiches Malea Mayim, Shemerik Mimena Mayim. The Ravid. The Ravid says once you put a handle on a sponge, the sponge is turned into a keli. It's not like a beged anymore. It becomes like a keli. And as a keli, using it with water in and out is just like filling a cup with water in and out. According to the Ravid, you would be allowed to use a sponge with a handle to wash your dishes. Now, we're not soymech on the Ravid in this case. In a different case, we're going to be soymech on it. We're going to see. But it's an important opinion.
So if you take the sponge with the handle,
Yeah.
you clean all the table, and then you can go in the sink and just
According to the Ravid, you can squeeze it out. According to the other Rishonim,
squeeze it with your hand.
yeah, even with your hand. Even with your hand.
Yeah?
Once it has a handle,
Handle.
you can squeeze it however you want.
Oh,
How you understand
Wow,
what is the
big
word
Kiddush.
with it with your hand?
Because it's like a cup. What's the difference how you squeeze it? Once it has a handle, it's like a cup. It's not like a baguette anymore.
oh, Kiddush.
Never heard it before.
It is a chiddush. Again, it's only the Ravid against the other Rishonim, and we don't rely on him in this case. We don't actually use a sponge with the handle to actively squeeze. We only use it to absorb a spill. But in the next case that we're going to see, we're going to rely on the Ravid.
Rabbi, who going to order a sponge with the handle for me?
The Ravid will order it for you. That's about it.
Which kind is you don't use it?
No. Except that we use it as a sniff leheter in the next case. Okay, Rabbi Size, I have to call it quits because we have to done Mav soon.
Yeah,
So-
I really bit
Okay, David, have a good night. I don't know where everybody else was tonight.
Rabbi,
All the best.
it was nice, sure.